inputs and popovers and dialogues and everything, right? Which are fun to build for a design system. But even more fundamental to that, and the things that I'm most excited about, interested in, is how that's all actually stitched together, right? How do we think about things from a foundational level, things like colors, typography, spacing, and how does that actually all get stitched together to provide a coherent theme and user experience for the app besides just a component library? So that's what we're gonna talk about, some theming with design tokens. So to understand that, right, we can need two definitions. One, theme, two, design token. So first, so we're gonna define a theme as a collection of colors and styles that defines the look and feel of an app, right? So colors and styles. So everywhere you look, every website you visit has a theme, right? Some are put together better than others, but all of them have a theme, right? So we've just got a handful of screenshots here of various websites, right? Like HackerNoon leans very much into the greens and the black and the yellow. It has that kind of pixelated icons and graphics, really leans into that effect. Medium, more black and white, not a lot of colors in there, right? Trying to get more of just a print writing kind of feel. That third one, we've got the React docs, right? That leans into a lot of blue for the React logo, a lot of blues, blacks, and whites. The Nintendo website, Nintendo has a lot of reds in there, a lot of reds, whites, blacks. Goodreads leans into a lot more of like yellows and greens and browns throughout the app. So all these have different themes, right? They all try to use a set of colors and styles to define this look and feel for the app that kind of defines the brand identity of the company or the product, right? Going beyond that, besides just having a single theme, sometimes a website will offer both a light theme and a dark theme, right? So here we've got screenshots of GitHub. GitHub, this just listens to like your operating system appearance settings preferences, right? It listens for if you prefer a light mode or a dark mode, right? So viewing the same page, depending on your user preferences, it'll show you either the light theme or the dark theme, right? And as you change between the two, like you'll notice everything on that page adapts and is theme aware, right? Everything from the logo and your username being shown in black in the light theme to compared to white text in the black theme. The background obviously changes. Even subtle things like the little contribution tiles right there. In the light theme, right, the darker ones are for heavier contribution days. But in the dark theme, it actually switches, right? It switches because of those colors where now the lighter, brighter ones are the heavier things. So subtle things like that, right, can switch between the light and the dark. The React docs are similar. They take a slightly different approach, right? Rather than just automatically adapting based off of your system preferences, they have a little theme switcher button, right? So in the top right of each one, they've got those three icons. The third one from the right, you've got the moon or the sun for switching between the light and dark theme, right? So they have an actual UI control that switches between those. But similar concept, right? Everything on that page is theme aware and allows it to adapt to whether it's a light theme or a dark theme. If you want to go even deeper than that, a little more complicated, this is something that I worked on at Webflow about 2 years ago. Our designer, our main app where you can design and build websites, is primarily a dark theme, a darker UI. But we also have a feature called appearance settings that allows you to customize how that dark theme appears, right? So we have 3 screenshots here. These are just inside one of our settings panels, but you can choose between the default settings in the middle versus a darker or brighter theme, right? And so beyond just a light or dark mode, we've now got further customization. We've got 3 different dark themes, right? And each one is subtly different. You can see as we move from the left to the right, everything within those themes are theme aware, right? And start to either brighten up or darken up a little bit, right? And then if you want to go even further than that, this is no longer a website or web app. These are just some system preferences, or sorry, I should say, yeah, app preferences for a terminal, right? Within your terminal, you can customize not just a single theme, but they go even more granular than that. They allow you to customize pretty much every single aspect of it, right? You can choose your foreground color, your background color. You can choose various settings here, right? For links and matches and badges, right? They give you control over every single aspect of this. So rather than choosing from just presets, you can build whatever you want. So how does that all work? How do we create these concepts of themings and allow users to customize the look and feel of the tools that they use? So that's going to bring us to our second definition. We've talked about themes. Now let's talk about design tokens, because design tokens are the magic of how it makes themes work. So design token is really just a fancy word for a key value pair that stores a design decision. So for instance, you might have a design token for your primary text color, or your secondary text color, or your primary background color, right? So again, just a simple key value pair. Primary text is black or white. Primary background color is green, whatever you want, right? We're gonna focus mostly on colors for this, but design tokens don't have to be just colors, right? You could have design tokens for typography. You could have it for spacing scales. You can have it for really any sort of design decision that is going to make up your app. So the theme for this conference, excuse me, is to learn, leverage, and master. So in this talk, we're going to learn about themes, we're going to leverage design tokens, and then master the art of building theme-aware web apps. So with that, let's get into a demo. We'll share out these slides later. If you want to check out the demo in your own time, you can find it at github.com/thehawkin3/theming with design tokens. So let's go look at this. I'm going to pull up our demo here. I'm going to pull up VS Code. All right. So demos are always fun, right? Demos help bring things from the more abstract topics that we're covering and bring them into more concrete terms, right? You can see these things actually in action. So what we have here is a very simple login page, right? This might be a slimmed down version of any sort of login you might see, right? We've got a username, a password, a login button, link to sign up to go to a separate sign up form. So fairly simple, but it's a nice clean looking login page, right? Like it's got some decent style decisions there. So let's look at how this is built. So in this demo, we've got 5 different steps that we'll go through, and we'll walk through each one as we start to take this from a simple light theme to an app that is more theme aware and more cohesive and scalable and able to be adapted over time. So, digging into the beginning here, right? We've got a beginning directory. We've got an app.jsx. I hope the font size is okay. We blew that up a little bit for you. But fairly simple app, right? We've got some design system components. This is not using any sort of third-party design system or component library. These are just some simple components that I built for the purposes of this app. So this is just built using Vite, React, some React components we've built, and then CSS modules for the CSS, right? We've got a simple app, we've got some text, we've got some just kind of container things for VStack or HStack, just kind of horizontal and vertical containers, which if you're not using in your design system or at work, you're missing out. You can't live without building with VStacks and HStacks. The text inputs, buttons, links, right? So fairly simple components there. We'll go to our components directory, right? So this might represent the component library that you have that you're working with. So how are these built, right? How are these styled up? So if we were to look, for example, at the button.module.css, you can see we have just a whole bunch of hex color codes, hex color values in there, right? So for instance, the focus outline is this shade of blue. Or but the default buttons are a light gray, primary buttons are a blue with white text, right? So we'd find all the styles there just using CSS hex color values right there in each component, right? So similar thing if you look at like link, it's got the link color there. If we look at text, it's got a color there. Even things in like the just like the main index file, right? We set like a background and a color on there. So that works, it looks fine. We've got a decent looking app. So what's kind of the challenge there? What's wrong with that? So imagine now that your company is going through a redesign or a rebrand, right? Inevitably, if you work at a company 2 or 3 years, you're gonna go through the rebrand, right? And we're gonna want to change the look and the feel of the app, everything about it, right? We're gonna change backgrounds, colors, fonts maybe. And so how do you actually approach that? And imagine, if you will, like not just these 8 components that I have here, but this company and product now has hundreds or thousands of files, right, that you're working with. And your task is now to go facilitate this rebrand, right? So you might take kind of you might think, how do I want to approach this? Like, okay, our blue is changing to a green now, right? So I might come in here and I'll just do a global search, and I'll just say, all right, we've got that blue color, and okay, it's used in a few places. It's used in button, link, text input, right? And once again, it's not just going to be 3 components. It's going to be several hundred components that are using this, right? So you might go through and just do kind of like a naive search and replace there. So I'm going to change that to green. So I do that, and our app update's nice. We've got some hot reloading going on there. Okay, and so now everything has changed to green. But now I might go through and think like, okay, was that intentional here? As I go through, now the text input is kind of subtle, but the border changes, that changes to green now. Was that intentional, or was it supposed to be just be buttons? Even things like just the focus indicator, like, okay, that outline around the button when it's focused, that's green now too. That looks all right, but was that intentional? Is it meant to be green? Is it meant to be blue? Links have changed too, right? I hover over this and say, oh, uh-oh, we missed that, because that's a different blue color for the hover state, right? So we go through here, and this could really just be this huge game of whack-a-mole, of just like trying to do global search. Maybe I come up with 200 search results. Do I replace them all? Do I go through them one by one? How do I make sure I've captured everything, right, and haven't missed things throughout the UI? Or maybe you have like divergent designs over time that have happened, right? Maybe some things are showing up for this blue, this hex color code value that you've got here, but other things used a certain off shade of blue because someone put in the wrong value, or some Figma design had the wrong token value, right? And now you try to do a search and replace, and you don't catch everything. So you thought you switched everything blue, and then you're doing some QA audits, and later realize, oh god, we missed that, right? So this is not a very scalable, sustainable approach to just have all of these hard-coded CSS hex color values all scattered throughout our app. So how can we make that better? So I'm gonna come in here and just undo those changes real quick. All right, we're back to blue. Okay, so that's our starting point. So let's go to step 2. Comment out this. Bring up demo 2. Save, hot reload, and nothing has changed. It looks the exact same. So not an exciting demo change, but what has changed under the hood? So we've got our directory here. We still have our app. It still uses all the same components. Nothing has changed there. But now we've got an index.css file, and you'll note that we're starting to introduce some CSS variables here, right? So we're now defining CSS variables that are set on the root element. And we're gonna start to define those for background primary, text primary, focus outline color, button default background, right? We are defining these CSS variables, which are representations of our design tokens, and we're defining them in a single centralized place, right? So everything now exists in this index.css file, and we have a single source of truth of where all of our styles are defined, right? So now, if we were to go look at some of our components here, we could find, for instance, our button.module.css, and as we reference these, you'll note that we now no longer have those hard-coded CSS hex color values in there. Instead, we're using CSS variables, right? So we're using var focus outline color, or var button default color, or var button primary background, right? So we're now referencing the CSS variables in all of our components. So now we're gonna go to that situation again. You've been tasked with a major rebrand, right? Where do you go to start updating things? One place. You go to the index.css file, right? So that's a good sign of not just in CSS and styles, but good code in general, good systems, right? We want these highly cohesive modules where everything that's related and everything that you need to change is in a single place, as opposed to scattered elsewhere throughout the app. So now, if I wanted to come over here and say like, okay, let's change these buttons again, we can change that to green again, and great, we targeted just the button, and we know exactly what we're targeting because it's the button primary background token there, right? So there's no longer searching throughout the entire app. There's no more questioning, should that change? Was that blue meant to change to green, or was that really supposed to stay blue, right? We have it all very clearly defined through these like semantic tokens, right? Of what is this? It's a button primary background, right? So this is gonna facilitate those rebrands, redesigns, and updates much, much more. So that's that. And this is just kind of an anecdote, but when we switched from demo 1 to demo 2, right, nothing changed visually in the app, which is a fun thing for like system design and more like design system and platformy type work is, right, it's often hard to describe the value of these changes that you've made, right? If someone looks at this and you're like, it looks the exact same, like, okay, why did you spend all this time doing this? It's like, well, because we're now facilitating change, we're making our app a lot more adaptable, right? So oftentimes it's hard to maybe visually explain those details to perhaps people that are less technical or not familiar with the domain space. But nevertheless, still a good sign of good system design, right? That allows your app to respond to change a lot more easily. So let's go to step 3. So we now have a light theme, and we have centralized tokens. We're now enabling ourselves to adapt to change a lot more easily. So now the request is, well, we've got a light theme for our app, but users really like dark themes. We really want to give people that. They've been asking for it. How can we implement a dark theme, right? So let's do that. So we're gonna come over here, comment that out. We're gonna go to step 3. All right, we've saved, we've hot reloaded. Nothing has changed. We're still same UI. But let's look at our code one more time. So now, we still have our same exact app file. We're still using the same set of components. When we look at our components, we are still using CSS variables, so nothing's changed in the components. But where we've defined our CSS variables have changed, right? It's no longer just in this index.css file right here. So now instead what we've done, we've created this themes directory, and we now have a light theme. And those are our same set of CSS variables right there. But we've also created a dark theme. So the dark theme, right, we've wrapped all of these CSS variables, the CSS selector here for the root, and we've wrapped it in this media query. For media prefers color scheme dark, right? And we define those same CSS variables, right? So one of the beauties, again, with working with design tokens and this concept of actually having names for our values here is that the token names are the exact same, right? So we're looking at just those first 3 lines, right? We have a background primary, a text primary, a focus outline color. That's defined in the light theme. In the dark theme, we have the exact same variable names, right? So the keys are the same, background primary, text primary, focus outline color, but the values are different, right? So in the light theme, the background is the FFF white. In the dark theme, the background primary is 333, well, blackish gray, right? And so in doing that, we've now created these CSS variables that are theme aware. The variable name stays the same, but the value changes. So now, if we go look at this in the app, we can pull up our system preferences. I'm gonna change my period settings. Ta-da! Everything's theme aware, right? We've got this nice little app. I can easily switch between the two. So how does that work, right? If we go look at the browser here and see just how that actually gets translated, again, if we just go open up your dev tools, open up the elements, you see your CSS stuff on the side. We're looking at the HTML and we've got the root right here. So we've got the root element, all of our variables are defined, there they are. Now we go change our system settings. Change to dark. And Now I've got our different CSS right here. We've got our app, media, prefers color scheme dark, and those same variables, but the values have changed, right? So we've now created a theme-aware app. Pretty exciting, right? So this is the approach that GitHub takes. It just, again, listens to your system settings, which is really just that media query for prefers color scheme, and allows you to easily switch between it. And again, to make this all work, all of your components need to be using the CSS variables, because now they're theme-aware. They're able to switch the value based on the tokens that are used, the CSS variables. All right, so let's take it a step further. So now we want not just an app that listens to your user preferences, your operating system preferences. We want to give the user more control. We've decided, actually, we want a control, so similar to the React docs, where we want control that allows the user to switch between their chosen theme, right? So let's let them decide. Let's make that a more conscious decision. So we've got a couple buttons here. This will be, just for demo purposes, we're gonna throw it right here, but obviously this would be tucked away somewhere in a settings panel or in the global nav through a little icon or something, right? But we now have visible UI controls, right? So I can click on this and ooh, it changes, right? There we go. So we've got some controls there. So how does that work? So looking through demo 4, we've now introduced a theme switcher. So we have the same app. The only thing that's different here is now we've thrown in a couple buttons within here. So we've got buttons to click for the light theme and dark theme. And we've got this use theme hook right here, right? So we've created this concept of a theme provider and a theme context. So we still have our themes here, right? We still have our light theme. That defines all that. But instead of just being defined on root, it's going to target root with this data attribute of data theme equals light. And then in the dark theme, we're going to target the root with the data theme equals dark. And so how that works then is we've wrapped our whole app. So if we look at the main.jsx, we've wrapped the entire app in this theme provider that we've created. So we've got this top level provider that can control everything and pass down values as needed. And then in our components, we've created a theme context and a provider, right? And so all that's really doing is just allowing you to have this method of supplying the theme, so telling the app what the current theme is, and then also a method of setting the theme, right? Which is going to be handled through these buttons. And when that happens, when the theme changes, all that's really gonna happen here is that we are going to change the data theme attribute that gets set on the root element, which will be the HTML tag, and we'll change that from light to dark, right? So if we go back to the demo one more time, right, you can see that in the HTML, we've got data theme equals light. Over here in the CSS, you can see we've got our CSS variables applied. That's selectors for root, data theme light. And now we come into the dark theme, and it's changed. Now we've got data theme equals dark, and root data theme equals dark, right? So, so core concepts there, right? We've now created this theme provider. We've provided UI controls. We've given the user more control over choosing their theme, as opposed to just listening to their system preferences. And these two ideas, right, are not mutually exclusive. You could do both, right? You could listen by default to the user system preferences and apply that by default, but then also give them control to override that if needed, right? So you can apply either or strategy or both, right? All right, so now here comes the fun part. So everything that we've done here has laid the foundation for building any sort of theme that you want, right? We have a theme provider in place. We've created a light theme and a dark theme. So what happens if you want a different theme, right? What happens if you need a seasonal theme for something coming up? What if you need a holiday theme? What if you need, maybe you're creating a third-party widget that will be embedded on different client websites? What if you need a different theme that helps, mimic their brand styles, right? So you have the same component that now can be used on hundreds of different client websites and custom styled for their design, so that's branded, right? Common request. How do we do that? Well, the good news is that at this point it's actually really easy. We've approached this from more of a systems thinking standpoint, where we set up the foundational framework in place that allows us to easily handle requests like this. So if we go to our demo now, I'm going to change to final demo, number 5. Some more themes. So I've introduced another button. We've got a light theme, a dark theme, and a glow theme. So as we go in there, right, the setup is largely going to stay the same. We have our main JSX file that wraps the app in the theme provider. We have an app that uses the theme. We've got just one more button in here that we've put in for this glow theme button just in our little UI controls. And then our themes directory, all we've done is we've defined a new theme, right? So we have this light theme here, that hasn't changed. We have the dark theme here, that listens for root data theme dark. And now we define the glow theme with root data theme glow. And we've thrown in a whole bunch of obnoxious linear gradients as we go in here, right? So now we can change, and now, ooh, we've got gradient buttons, right? So there you go. You can customize that however you want. And the fun part, right, like I only spent a few minutes just throwing in some gradients there, but we could change everything about this, right? Like we could change every single thing from the text color, the inputs, the focus indicators, everything, right? Everything that we've defined as a CSS variable, so using this concept of design tokens, we can now change and modify. And so as you build out this new theme, right, it could take you anywhere from 5 minutes to a couple hours to totally just build out this new theme, right? There's nothing stopping you from applying that and creating an unlimited number of themes here because we have all of the foundations in place. So with that, I think that's the end of the demo. So we're gonna go back to the slides here, and we'll wrap up. So again, that was the demo. We'll post these slides later, but if you want to play around with that, you can run it locally. Check that out on GitHub. So just to recap, the steps there I think are fairly simple, right? So step 1, if you want to successfully theme with design tokens, is to centralize your design tokens, right? No more hard-coded values scattered throughout the app. Create this highly cohesive module that now centralizes all of your decisions in one place. And this one I should note, like we use CSS modules, but this works, or CSS modules and CSS variables, but this works for any setup that you might have, right? So at Webflow, we take a similar approach, but we actually use a CSS in JS library. It's this custom library that's wrapped around emotion. But we don't use just like CSS modules, we actually have a giant object of JavaScript tokens, right? Which eventually get compiled into CSS variables. You might be using like SCSS or less, right? Which also have the concept of variables, right? But whatever your system is, you can still apply the same concept, right? Centralize your design tokens. So in step 2, create a theme provider. Provide an easy way to actually switch between that, utilize those themes, have the app listen to it. And then step 3, simply build your themes. And with that, that is everything. So thank you so much for listening. Hope you enjoyed that. Have a good rest of your day.